What is this? You really want to plan your fields in the life cycle perspective. What happens? All the companies prefer to take the oil first because it pays more, and the quickest you take it out, the more it pays to the company. So the temptation to burn or to flare or to vent the gas. I hope that here in Italy that doesn't happen because you are a very large consumer and you already have the infrastructure very close to your fields. So I hope this is not going to be relevant to you. But still, this is part of the issues that have to be considered because probably in the planning of your field, if you maintain the gas for long term, it's going to be much easier to take the oil. And then in the future, the oil business becomes a gas business. And so you have to plan the investments in that way. So that's what we did here, to have first some guidelines for the design of new projects, then the technical rules to reduce the flaring and the venting, and the operation and maintenance in a life cycle view. What is the design of new projects? This is the way this is done now in the oil industry, is through the front-end loading methodology. And now we have published the rules so that Pemex can comply with. Many of you might know this methodology. It simply is a way of regarding a project before you even start investing. You have a view and a concept of this. You start developing, you have gatekeepers or referees, your peers, that define if you are ready to go into the next step. So that's more or less the way you will have to do it here as well, I imagine. And this is the difference that can give you very good results or very poor results if you don't do it from the very beginning. In the case of the flaring and the venting in Mexico, what we have or we expect to achieve is that we finally will arrive to what is almost zero gas flaring and venting. That is possible today if you really use all the technologies. They are internationally available. There's many institutions that participate in this type of effort, so I hope that you don't have these problems. For us, it means saving more than $3 billion in a 15-year period. So it really pays back to do this type of planning. A new problem that we had in Mexico is that we had to expand the refinery capacity. What did we do? We asked all the different states, that means the regions in Italian language, to make a proposal. Everybody wants to have a refinery. Do they really know what it means to have a refinery? So here is the 3 stages that they had to pass through in order to define if you could build a refinery or not in a given place. First is the technical and economic criteria, the technology configuration, size, the site, the raw materials, and the operational efficiency. Then the ranking of the projects is with a specific view on the impact of the social and environmental implications. And finally, the optimization of the portfolio to see which of the projects pay the best returns. Here is the environmental criteria. It is a list that, of course, I will leave with you, but it covers the typical issues. I don't know if here in Basilicata you have a very seismic type of problems or not, but certainly I have heard that you have a geological risk and the topography that is very specific, the oceanography and the climatic conditions, water, air. All these aspects need to be studied individually. The same thing happens with the social criteria considerations. This is the list of aspects that a typical study on social aspects includes, all from the regional and local demographic base, which I have heard very much this morning about, demographic composition, the vulnerable groups that you have, the type of labor force, migration patterns, living conditions, and so on and so forth, which I'm sure that you have people that is very well qualified in the region to make good studies, and at the end of the day, tell you if you have enough all the elements to build a refinery here? Do you have the oil supplies enough and the type of oil supplies that require a new refinery? Do you have the type of additional infrastructure like railroads and ports? Do your soil and weather conditions allow for the type of natural gas and water that will be required for the activity? What are the market for the secondary products such as sulfur and residual fuel oil locally, because that's part of the business, and then finally the consumption of export markets. That's the result we got in Mexico. That's this particular project, Tula, was the one that got the project, and that's simply to present to you the overview of how we went through in Mexico. National content, what is that? That's the part of the money that remains here. So we are spending $22 billion per year in Mexico. And how much of that? $22 billion per year, of which 77% is in exploration and production. It is a very large business, and we have to identify all the projects if we really want to be part of that business. So here is the view of the investment program for 2009, and 2018. What we did discover is that our local content is very low. It's only 35% of those $22 billion. And why are we so bad at that? Well, it's because there's very low articulation in the supply chain and the limited installed capacity that we have in the country. There's also very low efficiency in the contracting process. This low share can be increased through close cooperation with the national industry, and it has to be competitive, of course. This is the way we prepared the study of national content strategy. What do they include? First, the review of the Pemex portfolio. That means if the population doesn't know what the project is going to be, you will not have the economic basis to take the decision of investment. That's the beginning. Second, what is the choice of the project? Is it going to be what type of raw material? What is going to be sited? What type of life cycle in the project are we going to have? Which are the critical resources of the project? What can be brought from the locality and what has to be brought from far away? What are the high technologies that are really needed? Which are low type of technologies that can be produced locally? And then the demand on operation and maintenance. That's a very good business that can be done locally most of the times. That is the future demand. And then all these with the historic demand and the analysis of the clusters. You were talking about clusters. Clusters are formed by families of products. So what type of families of products are you going to develop here? Because the cluster is a big business. Yes, it sounds fantastic. Everybody wants to have a cluster. Everybody believes they have a vocation for a cluster, but it is not so simple. You really have to have an organization to build the family of the cluster where you want to belong and to see how do you intersect and to what extent that family of the cluster is going to be also for the export markets. Finally, you have the supply analysis and the expected supply of chosen goods and the mismatches. The mismatch will have to be imported, or maybe it gives a new opportunity for the locality, and that creates the strategy for local content. This is the way and the summary of how the strategy was finally done. The diagnostic of how many bad things we are doing, where are our weaknesses, the type of small companies that we have, the fact that we might not have the technologies, the fact that we might not have a specialized labor force, and how then the strategies should look at that, including the financing. You have talked very much about financing today. This is the conclusion. You have to involve a number of persons. Now, how do you want to have it? Do you want to have the oil company in the middle, or do you want to have the Ministry of Economic Development in the middle? I don't know. That's a choice that every country will have according to the specific ways their institutions function.